Hi guys, welcome to Ace Your Health podcast. My name is Dr. Choksy. You're here at Ace Integrative Health. Thank you for joining us, Kaylee.
Thanks for having me.
So we're gonna continue our talk from last podcast that we did. We talked about water, and you guys learned about water, where it comes from, what people think about water, and what it actually means to have 0 calorie, where 70% of us is water, or 80%. So what are we going to talk about today in terms of water?
So, last time we felt like we ended up with more questions that we, or not questions, but things that we wanted to share about water. So we're going to kind of dive deeper over the next couple podcasts. But today I think we're going to talk a lot more about the filtration process that is, the tap water goes through. So what it goes through before it comes to us out of our tap. And then also what we can do about that, because it's like we talked about, it's recycled sewage basically.
Yeah, it's basically.
Yeah, so even with the filtration process, which might seem kind of thorough, we also have to consider they're adding chemicals to it just to treat it, and still it's filtered sewage water. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what filters might be best for you, what you can do at home right now to make your water a little bit cleaner before you drink it, even if you don't have a fancy filter yet. So yeah, we'll dive into all of that a little bit. So do you kind of know the process about how tap water is filtered?
So, it goes through a lot of different steps.
Yeah.
And I kind of know exactly what happens, but why don't you tell us?
Okay.
And then we'll go into a little bit more details about those things as well.
Yeah. So the first step is it's all pulled kind of into the treatment facility. And then they add chemicals. I don't know specifically what chemicals, but they add chemicals that basically bind to all the, heavy metals and dirt and bacteria and stuff and pull it down to the bottom. So then it kind of like, if you have powder in a drink and you don't mix it very well, it just kind of falls down to the bottom. That's what's happening with the nasty particles of the water. So then after that, they filter it through gravel, sand, all sorts of, filters. Yeah, and then, so that's supposed to get rid of parasites and bacteria and dust and chemicals, viruses. I don't know how effective that is. I think we could all guess that those are probably going to make their way through those particles. Yeah. And then it's disinfected with chlorine or chloramine to kill remaining bacteria, parasites, viruses, etc. So after that, fluoride is added to prevent tooth decay. And then that's a whole other topic in itself that we could talk about. But based on the water source, like where your water's from and what's in that water, they will do certain things to adjust the pH before it comes out of your tap. So let's kind of unpack why this process isn't ideal. Can you talk a little bit about how chlorine and fluoride affect
Chlorine and fluorine or fluoride, they have an interesting property because both of them are negatively charged ions. And when they go into our body, they compete with iodine or iodine. So when they're competing, we know how important iodine is into our neuronal health and especially for our thyroid. It's taking up that same receptor that iodine wants to bind to. So it's like iodine's trying to get through that door, but the door is more fitted and suited for chlorine and fluorine. So instead of iodine being picked up, now these other two negatively charged ions get picked up. So if you're trying to make thyroid hormone by using iodine, it will get affected because now we're not getting iodine because we're getting bromine and fluorine and chlorine. So that's something that we have to think about when we think about water and how important it is to know what's going on in our filtration system in our city, in our townships, because each of these townships and cities across the United States, pretty much across the world, they're all using different chemicals, different different ions, different crystals, and different filtration nets to filtration papers. They're using different things based on the available amount of money that they have, and then we get certain type of water that we drink, and we think that it's completely pure. Obviously, there's a lot more that can be done. There are devices that are out there that will test for negatively charged ions in the water, as well as number of small particles per deciliters of water.
Yeah.
So, which tells us how pollutant the water has, or how many pollutants does the water has. So that's kind of interesting.
There are test kits you can buy to take home, and which are awesome if you, like me, I grew up in the country and I had a private well in my house. So if we, looked at a resource that tested for the city's water, it wouldn't tell us much about our water because it was a private well. So you can buy test kits and test your water if that's your situation. Or if that's not your situation and you get water from, a city source, then the Environmental Working Group has an awesome resource where you can, I think you put in your zip code or your address and they'll say, hey, this is probably your water source based on your location. And then they've already tested for what is high in your water, which is awesome because you could buy a filter for one, for arsenic or for a certain bacteria or something, but that's not even a major issue in the water in your area. And so then it's not really helping you that much. And then you've essentially, I don't want to say you wasted money on a water filter, but it's not filtering out the things that are in your water. So that resource is awesome just because it tells you exactly what you need to work with, and they recommend filters based on what's in your water, so you can really filter out the things that are a concern where you are.
What's that resource again?
Where
can they get it?
The environmentalworkinggroup.org/water.
Okay, /water. Okay, so environmentalworkinggroup.org/water.
Yep.
Okay, that's a pretty good resource. It's all of us have to look into what type of water we're drinking. You can look at the pH. There are water testing kits that have pH sensors. There are particle sensors. There are obviously all the chemicals, pesticides, herbicides. Sometimes you can even get, especially in well water, if you don't filter it, if you don't boil it properly, you could get parasites in there as well.
Right.
And those are not obviously filtered out properly in many of these water situations. So that's something that's really interesting to look into.
Yeah. So what are some things that people could do at home, maybe, before they buy a filter? Because for some people, it's not something they can do right away. What's something that everyone could do today to make their water better and safer? Yeah,
one of the easiest thing to do is boil your water, distill it. Basically, that's the whole distillation process. But it's basically boiling the water, and whatever pollutants that start floating on top, if there are any bacterias and viruses, funguses that are in there, if you boil your water, they're gonna be dead.
Right.
Or at least a lot of them will die, if not all. And then you cool that water down, filter it, and then cool it down, maybe either one or the other, and then drink that water afterwards. And you may have a small pitcher, or you may have a small mobile water filtration system in which you can add this boiled water in there, so it will filter any other remaining particles out.
Okay. So you don't mean use like a coffee filter. You mean use still a water filter, whether it's a pitcher or I guess it wouldn't work for a faucet filter, but the pitchers that filter through.
Yeah. Okay. So at our house, what we do is a lot of times we boil the water and then we filter it through a coffee filter. Okay. So majority of the particles are already removed. Right. And sometimes we actually use 2 coffee filters to remove majority of the particles. Okay. And then whatever the water that's left over, you can still run that through like some type of a pitcher filter, and then drink that water. And usually almost most of the time, as long as the filter is good, the water will taste way better. Yeah. And now you're getting clean water. Right. that's cleaner.
And worlds cleaner than if you had just put it through that pitcher filter, because obviously you didn't go through the process of boiling it if you poured it straight into a pitcher. Yeah. And then also if you just boiled it, there's still going to be some particles there that didn't get filtered out.
Yeah, because if you're not boiling it, then you may be putting on bacteria and funguses inside your filter. Right. And they may not die because...
And then all the water you drink is just getting poured through that bacteria and fungus.
Toxins, because they're also producing toxins.
Right.
So that's something that you really have to think about, that if that little pitcher in filter inside your pitcher, if that starts collecting all the bacteria and funguses and they start growing on there and they start producing toxins, well, they're going to get filtered into the water.
Yep.
So boiling is quite important. That pretty much all of us can do. It just requires
it's
a little
bit of time. Such an easy step. Takes a few minutes. It's not even intensive. You put a pot on the stove and let it boil. I mean, set a timer if you need to, but it's pretty simple to do that and doesn't require any sort of crazy skill.
Yeah. What else can they do at home? In terms of making sure that their water, or they're taking care of their water, whether it's for their plants, whether it's for themselves. What's one other thing that you would think that they can do at home?
So one thing I'm a huge proponent of, and I know you are too, is structuring water. Putting words on water. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the next episode. I think we're going to teach you guys how to structure water. Yeah.
Perfect.
Give a simple synopsis of it so people aren't like, what is that?
That's a sneak peek for the next episode. But structured water is, we talked about water and how water has a lot of other things in it. Well, whenever you have other things in it, the water particles will sit some way, right? H2 and O will sit somehow with each other. If there's a little kink in there, well, that's because there's some calcium or magnesium or something else that's in there. The water changes based on, as she said, if you can structure it based on your words. So we'll talk a lot more about how we can structure it so that it affects our body in a positive way and it helps us manifest. So those two techniques we'll talk about next time into our next episode. And if you have any other questions for us, please let us know. Please we'll answer these questions. And subscribe, right? That's what this site is for. Yeah, follow us, download, and then if you really want to find out a lot more details with PowerPoints and PDFs and you want access to all of those, there is Ace My Health community, and the community has all the videos that we have plus all the other extra information that you can get access to. So that's for all of you guys. And with that, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. God bless. Namaste.